Before the execution, the condemned is allowed to say their last words. And here are some of the most striking ones. On July 7th, 1730, the pirate Levasseur was executed. Right before his execution, he shouted, "Find my treasure, whoever can," and threw a quoted note into the crowd with the location of the hoard. And for almost 300 years now, no one has been able to decipher that note. On October 16th, 1793, Marie Antoinette only apologized to the executioner, whose foot she accidentally stepped on before her execution. "Pardon me, monsieur, I did not do it on purpose." And the former mistress of Louis XV, Madame du Barry, who was executed on December 8th, behaved even more touchingly. She simply asked, "Just one more minute, Mr. Executioner." The famous train robber and murderer Thomas Ketchum, also known as Blackjack, before his hanging declared, "I'll be in hell, boys, before you even start breakfast. Let the harvest begin." Then he was hanged, but the hanging was a bit off, and his head was torn off. The philosopher Thomas More, before he was beheaded with an axe, asked, Wait, let me move my beard aside. There's no need to cut it off. It hasn't committed treason." Serial killer Albert Fish, when he was already sitting in the electric chair, said, "I really don't understand why I'm here. By the way, he killed 15 people." John Wayne Gacy, the infamous killer clown, right before his death said, "Kiss my ass." Johnny Frank Garrett said something similar, "I would like to thank my family for their love and care. And the rest of the world can kiss my ass." Jimmy Glass killed a married couple. Before his death, he said, "I'd rather be fishing." It's not entirely clear what he meant, but it really would have been better. James French, a double murderer. Before his execution, he said, "How about this for a headline? French fries." Carol Parr, murder and robbery. He claimed he was innocent, but he also wouldn't give up the real culprits. And before his death, he said, "To all my buddies, tell them I said, like Schwarzenegger, I'll be back." Peter Manuel killed 7 people. "Turn up the radio and I'll go peacefully." American serial killer Carl Panzeram, "Hurry up, bastard! I helped kill 10 people while you were fooling around." Cleveland Redding, "I have something to say, but not this time. Death by starvation." People invented masks of all possible shapes and different materials that prevented a person from eating. In many European countries, they were even called hunger masks. Another way to starve a prisoner was to place a device called the pear of anguish in their mouth. It actually sounds kind of dumb, but the invention is terrifying. This iron instrument appeared in the 16th century. With the help of a bolt or a spring, the body of the pear would open right inside the convict's mouth, making it impossible for them to scream, speak, or, of course, eat. Nothing at all. And in India, molten lead was poured down the prisoner's throat. Among some African peoples up until the 19th century, there was a custom. They would tie a murderer to the corpse of their victim so that they would rot together. 3 centuries earlier in France, during the religious wars, the Calvinists recommended tying Catholics together in pairs and leaving them to starve to death so that they would eat each other. During the war in Spain in 1936, the Republicans would pour a cement solution into a prisoner's mouth. Imprisonment in a cage. In Europe during the Middle Ages, caging was mainly used for members of the clergy to avoid bloodshed. The cage would be hung in front of the town hall, the Palace of Justice, or the cathedral. Quite a tourist attraction, isn't it? In addition, it was not uncommon for kind-hearted people to throw stones at the condemned for entertainment. The philosopher and historian Callisthenes was starved to death in a wooden cage. He was Aristotle's nephew and studied together with Alexander the Great. But most importantly, what was the reason he was put in the cage? Callisthenes refused to acknowledge that Alexander was the son of Zeus. There are many terrifying, absurd, and even comical stories associated with executioners. In 1847, the executioner Sanson was released from prison, where he had ended up because of debts, borrowed money again, and pawned the guillotine he used for work. The executioner de Berry carried out more than 200 executions, all while remaining a church preacher. His favorite sermon was a speech that called for the abolition of the death penalty. In 1923, the executioner de Ellis, after carrying out 204 executions, retired because he could no longer bear to look at the swollen faces of his victims. Incidentally, he became a barber. In 1823, the Swedish executioner Schellen was ordered to behead 2 criminals, one of whom was his son. The minister, of course, appointed another executioner, but the most interesting thing happened next. Schellen, he complained that he was being deprived of his salary and it was piecework for each head. The executioner Legros became famous for slapping Charlotte Corday after he had beheaded her. Anne Roche became his father's assistant executioner in 1824 at the age of 11. Once, the executioner Deedon hanged the condemned man 15 minutes early, and the most interesting part is that when the man had already been hanging on the rope for 15 minutes, a pardon arrived. The executioner Sanson died in 1972, falling from the scaffold as he was about to lift up a head to show it to the crowd. In 1865, the executioner Die Ketch struck the Duke of Monmouth's neck 3 times, but still could not kill him. Then he threw away the axe, saying, "My heart's not in it." The earnings of an executioner in the mid-18th century have been documented. In Paris, the rates were as follows. Burn. 90 livres to burn, 15 livres to hang, 3 livres to deliver to the gallows. Torture, 15 livres beheading, 100 livres cutting out the tongue, 20 livres. The most difficult and expensive is beheading. Immurement. In 15th century Japan, prisoners were immured in the supports of bridges. They believed that their spirits would give the bridge greater strength. In the mid-14th century, there were up to 30 special prisons in Paris. In a cell on Tennery Street, measuring 3.5 by 2 meters, up to 20 prisoners were held. A room 2 by 3 meters, like the vestibule of an electric train. Crucifixion. In Macedonia, Greece, and the Roman Empire, crucifixion was mainly used for slaves and sometimes for those guilty of especially serious crimes. The cross was not necessarily the way we are used to seeing it. Sometimes there were T-shaped, X-shaped, or Y-shaped crosses. An inverted cross allowed a person to be crucified upside down, so that they would suffer even more. By the way, people on the cross did not die from hunger or thirst, as many believed. They died from suffocation. A crucified person could only breathe if they pushed themselves up with their arms. They couldn't exhale the air filling their chest. Buried alive. In 220 BC, the Chinese Emperor Huangdi ordered 500 scholars to be buried alive because their writings contradicted the principles of his rule. The Code of Hammurabi in the Babylonian Empire allowed the law of retribution to be applied. If a building collapsed and people died inside, the architect's son would be buried alive. And in medieval France, women were not hanged out of considerations of decency. Oh, those Europeans. It was considered improper to watch a woman's legs twitch convulsively, so women were not hanged, they were buried alive. Apparently, watching that was considered acceptable, and in India, until the early 20th century, according to the religious customs of some peoples, wives were to be buried alive with their deceased husbands. Now that's what you call love to the grave. In November 1950, the British Royal Commission studied methods of capital punishment. They were studying whether hanging should be retained in the United Kingdom. The Commission interviewed executioners, and here is an excerpt from one of those conversations. How long have you been working as an executioner? About 20 years. How many executions have you carried out? Several hundred. Have you ever had any difficulties? Only once in my entire career. What exactly happened? He was rude. We were unlucky with him. He wasn't English. He made a real scene. The English are so very English. In England, there used to be a special order regarding the regime of clemency. It allowed for to pardon people from hanging if their necks were too thick. Furthermore, it is important to mention that during the period spanning from 1940 to 1955, a total of 5 individuals were officially pardoned.